Thank you so much for the invitation to come and speak today. And you guys are lucky to see Unique's new branding and logo. You're only the second time I've given a presentation, so that's it's very special. I'm going to be talking about the families that we support at Unique, and these are families that have rare chromosome and gene disorders. I think it's a really important distinction that our families have come through diagnostic screening rather than diagnostic testing rather than newborn screening. So I think just while I'm talking, bearing in mind that the uncertainty I'm talking about is actually not from screening, but from getting diagnostic testing. But I think that there are lots of lessons and things we can learn from patients living with uncertainty. So Jane just mentioned the diagnostic odyssey. And if you've ever seen me speak before, you will know that I always show this slide. And it's because it's this sort of convoluted route to getting to a diagnosis is the route that most of our families have gone through to get to that end point of diagnosis. And I think one of the arguments for newborn screening is always about reducing that diagnostic odyssey. And I think when we're talking about challenges, it's really important to recognize that getting to diagnosis is so important for patients and families. And of course, often that's about getting treatment and therapy and care plans in place. But also, if you talk to families, there's lots of other reasons why they really appreciate getting a diagnosis. So it's that stopping of that diagnostic odyssey, so that search for the answer to why their child has whatever symptoms they might have or why they're not developing as they might expect. I think it's human nature that we just want an explanation as to why something happens, and parents are often looking for that. We often hear that parents feel guilty about it. There's something they did or something they didn't do. So that kind of peace of mind and relief of guilt of having a genetic diagnosis. Of course, there's another argument that actually if it's been inherited, there's a whole guilt piece there. But often we find that parents are relieved to hear it wasn't that they had a glass of wine during pregnancy or whatever it might be. Getting a diagnosis often helps make future reproductive decisions. We hope that it will give families better access to information and support, and they can join support groups like Unique and other fantastic patient support organisations. We hope also that it will stimulate research and data sharing so we can learn more about these conditions, the natural history, as well as the sort of molecular basis of these conditions. And one of the things that we do at Unique, and I know lots of other patient groups do, is we put families in touch with other families who've got a child with a similar condition. And that can be extremely valuable for patients and families. So when you've been on that diagnostic odyssey, often when you get the result, it comes as a relief. This is something families have been looking for. They want an explanation. And I've put a couple of slides up here, which really highlight that sort of relief that families face. But of course, that's not the only feeling. Getting a diagnosis of a rare condition for your child is a really complicated one. And the rarity itself leads to a lot of uncertainty. So we're thinking about rare conditions. Often there is a real lack of information, often no information. And one of the things that we do at Unique is try to provide information guides to particular conditions so that families have appropriate information of their child's condition. Having said that, we only have 300 or so leaflets and we have more than 1,000 conditions under our umbrella. So, you know, that lack of information is a real challenge for families. Often there is not a care pathway to follow. We hear all the time that families really struggle to get their condition recognised by family members, the school, other healthcare professionals. The lack of, you know, sort of like name or awareness of the condition can have its own challenges. We've heard a little bit already about treatments, and of course one of the prerequisites, one of the principles for conditions going on the newborn screening was about access to a treatment. But I think for many rare conditions we know that there is no treatments available at the moment, and just generally a lack of research. I mentioned names already, and this can create an enormous amount of uncertainty for families. I've put here a few of the kinds of results that we see at Unique, and these are the questions that families come to us when they get one of these results. What on earth does this mean for my baby? How do I even explain this result to anybody? what's it called? So those, you know, those are not really names to anyone who is not a geneticist. And this one, XXX, it looks like a bad-handed Scrabble. And then we've talked quite a lot already about the uncertainty of the results themselves. And so there are several different ways in which the results can be uncertain. So I've already just mentioned about just generally the rarity makes it uncertain and the lack of information. But of course, parents and families get these results that either, as Caroline described, have variable penetrance and expressivity. And a quick shout out, we have a guide unique for both of those things. We don't have one for pleiotropy at the moment, so I might be contacting Caroline about writing one. But also these variants of uncertain significance. And I think we all know that these can provide lots of challenges for families that we've talked about before. And I've included on this slide a couple of the quotes that we've had from families that got these uncertain results. It's a bit frustrating because we've got told that the abnormality has come for his dad and therefore they didn't think that it was relevant to my son's problems. That isn't very helpful. Initially, I would say I didn't cope very well, but I clung onto those variants as an answer. And this one, confused, a bit bewildered, and just left really. And this leads to families feeling really isolated and helpless. Last summer, Unique undertook a survey with some of our members, and I'm just going to give you a sort of top line of the answers to one of the questions. This is just a summary of the people that answered it. We have an inherent bias in Unique that many of our members are mums rather than dads, and you can see that here the answers to these questions are very much maternal, because 81% of our responses came from mums. But we asked a series of questions which were around general experiences of having or living with a rare condition. And one of the questions we asked was, from the list of words below, which best describe your experience of having or caring for someone with a rare chromosome or gene disorder? And 70% responded that it made them feel anxious. 60% said frustrated, 60% said stressed, 51% said isolated, but 50% said determined. And actually, I think those of us working in patient support know that our parents often have to really fight for access for their child to healthcare, support at school, access to speech and language therapy. And we know that our parents and carers often are extremely determined. When we asked our families also about hopes for the future, and I thought this was an interesting one to share, because I think so many of the answers were about getting a diagnosis earlier, getting it quicker, making sure that access to testing and diagnosis was equitable across the world. And so I thought I would leave on this sort of more hopeful note rather than all of the challenging notes. You can read some of these quotes, and I think they probably won't be a surprise to many people, but I think these are the things that are driving us forwards in genetics and genomics. And I just wanted to end by thanking all of our fantastic families, some of whom you can see on this slide here. And I'm really happy to take questions in the panel afterwards.